Hi, this is Pat Lynch, and tonight we're going to be hearing a talk about data collection of our children's data by the federal government, in our case, the state of Nevada, and our county. So this may apply to you, probably does, if you have any form of Common Core in your state. So I hope you'll enjoy this.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for coming. Really appreciate that you're here. My name is John Eppolito. I have 3 kids still in Washoe County schools. Can you guys hear me okay? No. I have 3 kids still in Washoe County schools. I'm a former teacher, and I've been very involved, and I've spent way too much time looking at this student data and what's happening to our kids' data. And I want to point something out. In this room right now, there are people that are very conservative and there are progressives. And a lot of things we can't talk about. But the one thing that we can talk about is student data mining, because that is the one thing that we all agree on. So we're going to keep the discussion focused on student data mining only, slightly, maybe a little bit on education, but no, nothing else, nothing very political. Because again, we all agree on this subject if we know about it. Our board, for example, our 4 board members who are here, there's 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats out of this board that are here right now. 2 of us are former teachers. This presentation is based on facts, and most of the supporting links are in blue throughout the presentation. And after the presentation, if I have your email address, I will email out a PDF of this. The main topics that we're going to cover, go ahead. I'm going to try to go through the presentation, and if you have any questions, try to remember the slide number if possible. I'd like to get through the presentation in case people don't want to stay for the questions and discussion. The main topics. We're going to talk about student data mining via the testing entities, the Nevada Department of Education, the federal government, the third-party vendors like Edmodo and ClassDojo, and the one-to-one devices and device manufacturers like Google. We're also going to talk about the social and emotional learning and the psychological assessments being used in Washoe County. By the way, we have a State Board of Education member here, a few PhDs, a school board member, so it's a mixed group that's here. So, background. I'm going to talk for about 4 or 5 minutes about the Common Core. The Common Core, it was written in 3 steps, and most everything happened in the first step, that was writing the standards. 13 out of the 29 writers were from the testing entities. The College Board, which is SAT, AP, Springboard, and the ACT. Most of the other 16 were from 2 nonprofits, Achieve Inc. and Student Achievement Partners. There were no K-12 teachers involved in that first step of writing the Common Core standards. Because sometimes you'll hear that there weren't. Step 2 was the feedback groups, and this was English language arts and math. There was 37 people total. There was exactly 1 teacher in the feedback group. That was a teacher from Virginia. Virginia did not adopt Common Core. It was one of the 5 states that didn't adopt it. By the time we got to the validation committee, which was pretty much the rubber stamp committee, at least that's what people on it called it, there were 29 people. And to be on that committee, you had to sign a confidentiality agreement that said you would never disclose what happened in that meeting, in those meetings. There was finally 1 other independent teacher from Arizona, and then 2 teachers representing the 2 large unions in the country. So the whole process, but by this time, the standards couldn't be changed. It was just yes or no. And so there were exactly 2 independent teachers on the whole thing. But on this committee, there were 2 curriculum specialists who had already written high time-tested standards. Both of them, plus 3 others, would not sign off on the Common Core. 5 total. Their written reasons why were never published. We don't know why. And we don't even know who picked the people to be on the committee. Bill Gates was behind it, though. He was part of it. Well, the standards were being written. 500 early childhood health and education professionals signed a letter to the people who now hold the copyright, the National Governors Association and the Chief Counsel for State School Officers, the people like Steve Canavero and Dale Urquiaga was the former here in Nevada. They're trade organizations. They really have no official authority. So what this letter started off with is, quote, "We have grave concerns about the core standards for young children now being written by the NGA and CCSSO." And then they continued, "We call on the two entities to suspend their current drafting of the standards for children in kindergartens through grade 3. So how did they respond? In their limit of liability. Now, it's rare for copyright, for standards to even be copywritten, but the Common Core was copywritten. So in their copyright, they limited their own liability. I'll read the part in red. Quote, "Under no circumstances shall the NGA or CCSSO be liable for any damages, even if advised of the possibility of such risk and potential damage." So they made sure they were protected. Once they did that, they spent $360 million so two companies could write the Common Core tests. Pearson wrote the PARC test, and McGraw-Hill wrote the Smarter Balance test. Most states have dropped out of these consortium by now. Not Nevada. Nevada is still in SBAC. SBAC testing, and I do have a handout on SBAC testing. There's about 5 or 6 handouts, and when I get to the part in the presentation, I'll let you know that there's a handout up here. Read what the Sparks teacher wrote and what the New Hampshire teachers wrote in the SBAC handout. I think it's the first one on the table, closest to me. It used to say on the SBAC's website that only half of the kids who take the test will pass or will be proficient. That link has been removed, but here's the 2015 results for 11 states, and it was about half. Nevada's not one of those 11. Here's the Nevada results. 2015, the first chunk is the math. We didn't hit 50% proficiency in any grade. And then the second is it's really the English language arts. And we almost hit 50% in 5th grade reading. So in February this year, Education Week wrote an article, there's only 14 states that are still giving the SBAC. Since then, 2 states have announced they're going to drop the SBAC, West Virginia and North Dakota. So by next school year, there'll be at most 12 SBAC states. In the name of test security, SBAC tells us they will be monitoring or spying on student social media accounts, at least during the SBAC testing. And they also give suggestions on how the state and local districts can do the same. And again, this blue link at the bottom, this is where they tell you how to do that. I put the pages on here. It's their document, the Smarter Balance document. Okay, this SBAC test, we just went through it. This is a secret 10-hour computer adaptive test. This test, it's more of a student data mining tool for third parties than it is a criterion reference test. Per SBAC's contract with the United States Department of Education, quote, "The SBAC is required to provide timely and complete access to any and all data collected at the state level to the federal government, Department of Education, or its designated program monitors, technical assistance providers, or research partners, and to the government accounting office." So sometimes the state or the local district will tell you that they don't share the data from the SBAC with others. They might not, but SBAC has to. So that's a little loophole that Dale Urquiaga used to say that when he was the whatever that position is. The
Superintendent of Public Instruction.
Thank you. So our 3rd through 8th graders, they sit in front of a computer for 10 hours for one test. And us parents get a few scores of 1 through 4. 1 meaning does not meet the standards, 4 meaning exceeds the standards. And that's for, and we don't see the results till next year. The test that all the kids just took, the results, last year's test we got back to like November or December. It was just before the holidays. It's useless. Now here's a lady, Dr. Peg Luxick, and she talks about this test. She can say it better than I can.
Wonderful. The problem isn't that it's self-paced. The problem is that the test is open to manipulation. So I
Maybe
want
she can't.
it to look like the students are doing poorly. I can adapt to make the test be adapted to make the test easier. And you as parents or taxpayers or policy setters will never know which way the test was adapted because it's an internal mechanism. So it is not a valid assessment, and that is the fundamental problem with it, is that the test is being manipulated as it's being taken. In other cases, when you're not in math, but you're in some of the more history or other areas where it's more philosophy driven, you have to comply before you can move on. So the child is put in a position of you must agree. I don't agree with the global warming. No, but you have to, because the test won't let you move on unless you comply. So when the test makers can make the test adaptive, we can make it easier, we can make it harder, or we can make it so that we force compliance. You can't take the next step unless you comply with whatever it is that's being taught or presented in the test. So even if you don't agree with it, you're going to have to write it. You're going to have to say so.
Wow.
Okay, and she continues. I hope this.
When we were fighting outcome-based education, I was in every state but Hawaii. And in one state, I was reading the assessments, and it was a reading assessment. And it was a story about a child who found the wallet, and there was money in the wallet, and what do you do with the money? I'm sitting in the Department of Education, reading it in front of the undersecretary, because they didn't want me to make a copy and take it anywhere, which was fine. And the question was, to the child, if you found a wallet with money in it, would you take it? Do you read better if you say yes, or do you read better if you say no? Or were they testing a child's honesty on a state assessment with their name on it that was computerized? But because it was paper and pencil, I could find it. What if I put that in a computer test? And if they don't give the right answer, I can change the computer to move them in the next direction. So computer adaptive testing is really dangerous for our children because the state can manipulate achievement data by making the test harder if they want or easier if they want. And you won't know. You'll just get proficient results. Or they can use the test to test for and then influence what your child thinks and how your child thinks about a variety of topics. And again, parents thought that was a reading test. They didn't know that it was that honesty was being tested on a paper and pencil state assessment with their child's name on it. That's now part of their record. And no child would think to say, is that a reading question? Children just answer the questions in front of them because they're kids. They just take the test. That's what they're using the test for. And computer adaptive makes that so much easier and therefore so much more dangerous.
I know it's a lot to think about, and I know we're going to go fast, but you'll have the presentation after this, so you can look through it yourself. And there'll be a link for that video. There's a link right there. It's like a total of a 7-minute video approximately. So whatever information is gleaned from the SBAC test follows your child the rest of his life. This stuff doesn't go away. That permanent record they used to joke about when we were kids, it's here, and it's digital, and you don't know what's there. Okay, I'm not going to go through every company. Briefly, the companies behind the scenes, including the SBAC and these other companies, they're the ones getting the most data on the SBAC test. So I'll go through them quickly. The one I'm going to talk about quite a bit is AIR, American Institute for Research. Per SBAC's website, quote, AIR will develop an open source solution for delivering the consortium's online computer adaptive assessments to students. Now, AIR, a little history on AIR. 1946, John Flanagan founded AIR. Prior to that, he was the chief psychologist involved in the eugenics experiments via the Pioneer Fund in the late 30s and early 40s. The stated purpose of the Pioneer Fund was to increase the birth rate among superior groups. That is AIR. Okay? Per AIR's website, and the links are here. I don't make this stuff up. You know, I didn't just decide that sounded good, I'll say it. It's fact. Per AIR's website today, they claim to be, quote, one of the world's largest behavioral and social science research and evaluation organizations. That's who's in our schools now. And I don't think Washoe County School District knew what they were doing when they invited these people in. And when I go to the meetings, they really don't want to hear me talk about this. Data Recognition Corporation, this is a company Nevada pays to administer the SBAC and the end of course exams. And they're very much into this psychometrics. And for time, I'm going to skip past this. eMetric, that's another company being paid by the state of Nevada, and the founder of that is a psychometrician, a renowned psychometrician. Crest, that's another company that's going to get this raw data from the SBAC. They're also into this psychometric modeling. And Calder, they're all about following kids and teachers from when they start preschool through probably death is what we're thinking, but at least through the workforce. That's Calder. And they're in the same headquarters with AIR now. They've moved in with AIR. It's a nice little cozy arrangement there. Psychometrics, we're talking about non-cognitive things. We're talking about psychological measures, we're talking about attitudes, we're talking about personality traits. We're not talking about math and science and English and what the kid knows or doesn't know. We're talking about things that I don't want these people knowing about my kids. That's why my kids don't take the SBAC. So it looks like all these entities will get SBAC data if your children take the SBAC. There's a clinical psychologist, Dr. Gary Thompson in Utah. He says that these entities will be using the SBAC data to develop psychological profiles on students. Nobody tells the parents this. Most of the people that work at the school don't know this. If you're, because nobody has a vested interest to tell anybody this. There's stupid people like me that spend way too much time on this. If your child takes the SBAC, you will never know what data was shared, who gained access to it, how it will be analyzed, and how it may affect your child's future. In Nevada, we spend over 17 million or 14 million a year for the SBAC. But that was this slide's a couple years old, so it could be more now. The SBAC has been deemed unconstitutional in Missouri, and 4 states are challenging the constitutionality of SBAC because it's a national test, but it was done without Congress. March 2014, the Nevada Department of Education threatened all schools in Nevada, if you don't have 95% participation on this test, you'll automatically be a 1-star school. That's the lowest school we can have in the state. Well, Incline, this is our 3rd year. I happen to live in Incline. Incline Middle School, this is our 3rd year where we're going to be probably, well, way over 5% opt-out. The first 2 years we were 20%, 25% opt-out. So they changed the rules. They wrote this long thing. I don't even know what it says. But they're not doing what they said they were going to do. But many schools still won't let parents opt out or won't inform you because of this 1-star thing. So here's a summary of the SBAC. 10-hour test plus all the time preparing for the test. At my kids' middle school, it was 3 weeks of change schedules for this one test. This 10-hour test turned out to be 3 weeks of schedule change. According to many people, it's based on developmentally inappropriate standards, especially in the lower grades. Designed to fail half the students. We won't have it back until the following school year. The results are useless to us, but not to AIR and those third parties like SBAC and all those parties we just talked about in red. And when the results do come back, Nevada will only be able to compare its students to kids in 11 other states. Remember, next school year there's only 12 states giving it unless more drop out. Used to be like 30, and now we're down to 12. Nevada's like going down with this shit, man. Nevada teacher evaluations will be determined in part by SBAC scores.
But wait a minute, there is a change, a small change to that.
I saw that. I want to stick to this. We can talk about that at the end if you don't mind.
All right.
At least during the testing windows, the student social media accounts will be monitored by the SBAC. 14 million a year just for the test, plus the computer upgrades and labs and infrastructure into the schools. It may be unconstitutional. The 95%, if you don't have 95%, the State Department already threatened the schools. And the worst thing, all those things are probably the good news, the worst thing is the student data mining and sharing of this data and the possible student psychological profiles, and all this is without parent consent. As an educator, I taught for 6 years. I never opted my kids out of, I have 4 kids in the schools, one's in college. I never opted my kids out of any test until the SBAC. My oldest is currently at Columbia University, Ivy League, New York. It's the only time I'll brag right here. But none of my children will ever take the SBAC or the 5th and 8th grade science exam. I wish I could keep them out of the end of course exams, but they're the 4 exams required to graduate now. New York, they've had over 20% opt out of their Common Core test, which isn't near as bad as the SBAC. It's much shorter, and I don't think there's as much data that has to be shared with others on their test. They've had over 20% opt out statewide for at least 3 years in a row. And they're not losing any money. The end of course exams and the 5th and 8th grade science exams. End of course, at minimum, Data Recognition Corporation, that's the one that was involved with the psychometrics, they'll have access to hours of raw data. That's why I wish I could keep my kids out of it, but right now I can't. The NDE will also collect, store, and share data from all of these exams, the SBAC, the science exams, and the end of course exams, in the SANE, the Student Accountability Information Network. And I'll show you in just a minute what I'm talking about there. But before that, I want to talk about the social and emotional learning. The Washoe County School District has invited AIR and CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, into our schools. In September 2016, we at Protect Nevada Children learned Washoe County School District would be taking a $250,000 anonymous donation for social and emotional learning. We asked if the school board knew who the donor was. 2 months later, the district said, no, we don't know. The school board didn't know. On December 1st, a few of us went to this event here in Washoe County. They'll talk about it in just a minute. I wanted to see how the social and emotional learning would be assessed. Because to me, that's what it's all about, is how is it assessed and what kind of record is there of what's wrong with these kids. So we started asking in December how social and emotional learning would be assessed, and we started asking the school district. 6 months have gone by, the district won't answer our questions. Well, our one question, that's the question. How is it assessed? Despite the district's attempt to keep us in the dark, last month we learned that Washoe County School District would be using 2 psychological assessments. The Devereaux Student Strengths Assessment, I have a handout here, and the SEL Web. This was a screenshot of Devereaux Student Strengths Assessment at the beginning of this month. And I know it's probably hard to see, but up in the upper left corner, what it says is Psychological Assessments and Services. This is the DESSA. This is what's being used right now in Washoe County. So now we have more questions which they're not answering. The Wall Street Journal wrote about, have you seen Junior Psych Profile? Public schools may be assessing your kids without your consent. They only mention one assessment, and it's the psychological assessment, the DESSA, the same DESSA that's used in Washoe County. Now here's a man from AIR. I can't stand this guy. This is one of their big bragging opportunities, so hopefully this one will play better. It's a better quality.
The Department of Education has just released a tool, self-disclosure. AIR under contract helped them develop it, and AIR under a center that I lead also supports this. But I'm telling you about the tool not because of that, but because of the fact that it's free, because it produces data in real time, and because I do think over time it would be very, very good if many people in many states were using some of the same items, if not all of the same items, so we could get a sense of places. And if you want to look at what the department has done, it's focused on 3 dimensions: engagement, safety, and environment. I won't deal with everyone, but what I think is particularly important under engagement is looking at cultural competence. How do people experience environments in terms of their own sense of difference, both individually and as a member of a group? Safety, which includes emotional and not just physical safety. And environment, which includes, as Cindy talked about, getting a sense of the instructional environment. it can be administered at a school, a district or state level. Data are back in real time. I think in addition, there is the ability to add items. Oh, that's the end almost? Okay, so let me just end, because I really are on time, by saying, that I'm leading the evaluation of an 8-district social and emotional learning initiative. And
Washoe County is one of those 8 districts. We're one of the 8 experimental social and emotional learning districts in the country. Aren't we glad? This guy's at least a little nicer, but he's from Air also. That other guy gives me the willies. I don't know.
One, I'm gonna follow up a little bit with David on the Collaborative District Initiative and talk a little bit about that and some policy recommendations that's come from that. And then I'm gonna specifically try and target in on social emotional learning assessment, because we are here to talk about the 5th indicator and what does assessment really look like when we're thinking about social emotional competencies. So as Angela mentioned, the Ed Policy Center recently put out a brief on the Collaborative District Initiative, or the CDI. And it really is targeted in thinking about what is the district level policies and supports promoted by the CDI. And it also includes some nice research findings from being led by David and Kim Kanzora, who really led that effort. And then goes into some policy recommendations based on the work that we did and based on some other work that we're doing at the state level. So I highly recommend going through it. We actually have another event coming up at the end of November where Castle, one of the districts, Washoe County, AYPF, and AIR will actually be talking about detailed efforts in this. So to get a little bit more of that practice orientation, I highly recommend going to that event.
I went. I was not impressed. I was not impressed because of the assessments and tracking these kids, pigeonholing these kids. They want to know what's wrong with our kids. I only have one perfect kid, and he's already at Columbia. And if you don't believe that, just ask him. He'll tell you. The rest of my kids aren't perfect. So I'm concerned with what they're doing with every kid in Washoe County. And I tell you, I think I just learned something. Watching the slide right before this, today I discovered on the State Department of Education's website, there's a link to a social and emotional survey sponsored by AIR. And kids have to log in to do the survey. That might be what the former guy was talking about, David. I just figured that out, and
they're spotting shooters.
I could be wrong. What's that?
They're literally spotting shooters.
Spotting shooters.
Yeah.
What's that mean?
Kids who would shoot up their schools. They're profiling.
Yeah, they're definitely profiling. Let's go through this. There's so much to talk about, but I really would like to get through this. So we're one of the 8. I think there's 8 districts. We're the social and emotional experiment for the country, one of 8. And again, the district doesn't tell you guys any of this. They didn't tell me. I had to figure all this out. So what can you do to protect your kids? That's really what this is about. So in regards to the social and emotional, find out how your school is assessing the social and emotional learning. Because just the social and emotional on its own, some people might not like it. They might think it's a waste of time. But in my mind, where it's especially dangerous is when you're assessing it, you're getting a written documentation of what's wrong with the kid. If you're just teaching the kid to get along and to do certain things, teachers have been doing that for years, for forever. But it's the third parties that are bringing in that want the data on the kids. So just say no to any assessment. And I know it's hard. Ask specifically about the DESA, the psychological assessment that the Wall Street Journal, I think it was, talks about, and the SEL Web. But no, your school could be using a different assessment or a different SEL or psychological assessment. They're not all psychological assessments. Those two are. The DESA and the SEL Web are. Keep your children away from all surveys, even if the district says they're anonymous, especially online surveys. Washoe County, we used the school climate survey. This is the one I was just talking about that I think David Osher was just talking about from AIR. The what do they call it? The School Climate Social Emotional Learning Survey. It's on the NDE's website, and there's the link to it. They tell you it's from AIR, eugenics. They don't tell you that. They just tell you it's from AIR. And then you have to log in before you can take the survey. So what a nice way for AIR to get this data on kids without parents knowing. Mm-hmm. Plus they get all the FSPAC data. They want all the non-cognitive data. And this is the hardest part, but I do it. Keep your kids off computers at school. if your kid is on a computer, especially if it's a young kid, you don't know what they're doing, especially a one-to-one device. If it's a one-to-one device, it's even worse. But anything they have to go log into, I keep my kids off. I have a kid in high school. We're the first one-to-one school in the district, Incline Village. My daughter does not use it. She logs in with her teacher's account. She uses her personal computer. We've gotten around it. It's easier at the middle school. But I know it's hard, but that's really what it has to come to. And hopefully the district is going to help us with this. Can you hold the questions till the end?
Well, this is important on that.
Okay.
AB 7 includes twice as much for computers this year.
467 had a bunch of money.
Yeah.
That's the one that's being held. That's the one we're trying to get our language to at least inform parents. But we can talk about that at the end if that's okay. Okay, one-to-one devices, third parties, Google, third-party vendors, I should say. How are these free education vendors paid? This is the longest video I'm going to show you. It's just over 5 minutes. Joel Reidenberg is a professor, law professor at Fordham and Princeton. This is a parent. The two people in the middle are on the other side. And the one lady with the blue jacket, she's from a school district in Texas. And I agree with her on one thing, and I'll let you know when we get to that point. But again, it's just over 5 minutes.
I mean, the more the government collects data of any sort, you know, we've seen every agency, eventually it's going to get out somewhere, and this is supposed to be confidential data. So it's a scary thing. But Mr. Reidenberg just said something kind of shocking, and I want you to repeat for me because I almost fainted, so I didn't hear the whole thing. The percentage of vendors who are getting, apparently in compensation for what they're doing, are sending out data. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
The school districts that are getting a service for which they are not paying cash. So the quintessential example is Google Apps for Education. The school districts aren't paying for it with cash. But what is Google getting? Google is getting the personal information of all of the district's children.
Could you give me an example of that information they're getting?
Homework assignments, communications between teachers and students, presentations that kids are working on in school, if they're working from school, search terms that are being used.
So in other words, if Google wants to sell a product and my niece is working on something on who knows what, they're going to know what she's chosen for her, whatever, middle school project or something?
Yes, but Google has now said that they won't use that data to market or advertise to the children. They haven't said whether they would not use that data to develop the product, to create the content for the product.
What else would they be doing with it?
That's a very good question. It's non-transparent. One of the difficulties is what the vendors do, how they're using this information. It's not transparent. It's not stated often in the contracts. If you look at the contracts that school districts have with their vendors, and we've done that, we analyze those contracts, it's very difficult to figure out exactly what they're doing.
And so these people, in addition to the garden variety government employees, well, Ms. Seeger, you want to?
Thank you. So the situation that you bring up is interesting to me because with this relationship that Google has with the district, and this goes even to some online apps that are used in the classroom. Parents and students do have an expectation of privacy, but they don't always realize when they're opting out of it. And so part of engagement and information sharing would be to educate teachers, administrators, parents, and students when they are opting out of privacy, for them to understand that by participating in something, by using Google or one of those platforms, that they are giving their information up.
I'm gonna, 5 minutes is running out, I got it. Okay, well, sure, you say something, I got a broader question.
Just very quickly, back to our earlier comments, this information, this concept of transparency and trust, that within our communities, it is school districts' responsibilities and states' responsibilities to inform and educate parents so they can make informed decisions. We cannot do this in
that's where I agree with her, and that's what we're trying to do in Washoe County and at the State Department of Ed, is to get them to educate parents. So people can say that they're going to do this stuff in these hearings in DC, but it doesn't happen, and to get them, to try to get it to happen in our state has so far been impossible, but it's going to change. I have faith.
I don't think we can do it with legislation, with policy, or with practice. It's got to be a partnership between companies, school districts, parents, and students, so that they're informed when they make these decisions, and we can use that power of technology. I fear a world where we cannot use the technology to transform learning, but I also fear a world where our students' privacy is jeopardized. But I think we can balance that, and I hope that we will, because I think the potential is transformative.
Well, I'm 59 years old. I grew up with all this stuff, and I don't feel I missed anything. But be that as it may, maybe I did. Maybe I'd be so much better off if they had it. Mr. Reidenberg, one quick question. By the time I am, let's say I go to graduate school, so we got all this stuff, or like I did, went to law school, and this stuff was in place from the time I was 3 years old in daycare to 25 years old in law school. Can you give us like a 1-minute summary of all the stuff that would be in one place that somebody could find out about me? You know, that we all have to have, or whatever it has to have.
Well, probably the easiest way to do that in a minute is just think George Orwell and take it to the nth degree, and that's probably what would be available. I mean, we're in an environment of ubiquitous surveillance, essentially. So the data from all sorts of devices can be captured and synthesized in an enormous number of places. And as we see emerging between what children do in the classroom, what they do at home, outside the classroom, I think we're going to see a lot of pressure to have data from each of these places, what's done in the privacy of the home with what's done in school, being merged together. And it will just be an extraordinarily rich data set of your life.
Gentleman's time's expired. Thank the gentleman.
The chairman is not interested. If you watch the whole thing, you'll realize which side the chairman's on. Okay, so again, that's both sides talking. The lady in the blue jacket is on the other side, and the lady that never spoke is from Microsoft. People like Microsoft, Google, Apple, they're very involved in this because they're the ones that want to know all the information. Okay, so the Google Chromebook. In December 15, the Electronic Frontier Foundation filed a complaint with the FTC that alleged Google that Google is violating, quote, that Google is violating the voluntary student privacy pledge, then using information to create behavioral profiles. I don't know how that ever turned out. Google has a way of getting away with things. The very next month, our Nevada Commission on Education Technology authorized $20 million be spent on Google Chromebook one-to-one devices. The reason Google is so popular is because they give the devices away at cost. Because Google doesn't care about the device. To Google, it's all about the data. So if you're using their device, they come with the setting where Google knows every single thing a kid does, whether it's schoolwork, watching the soccer game, if they can go to pornography, whatever it is, the laptops come with the setting that they can see everything, Google that is. January this year, the Attorney General of Mississippi filed a lawsuit against Google. And part of that lawsuit, it said, quote, Google tracks, records, uses, and saves the online activity of Mississippi's children, all for the purpose of processing student data to build a profile. You can hear profiles, student profiles, psychological profiles, behavioral profiles. So this lawsuit's not settled yet, as far as I know. The Electronic Frontier Foundation released a report last month after 2 years of research, and I have a summary of the report up here as one of the handouts. It says, the title is Spying on Students, School-Issued Devices, and Student Privacy. And the full report is at the blue link if you get the PDF of this. Now these free third-party vendors are very problematic. Edmodo, ClassDojo, and there's hundreds others. There are a couple of the bigger ones though. If you look at the privacy policy and the terms of service agreement, that's where it tells you what these vendors can do if you trust them, because there's not a whole lot of teeth if they don't do what they say. But Edmodo, for example, that's widely used, might be one of the biggest ones used in Washoe County. Edmodo tells you in their privacy policy, quote, "We employ other companies and people to perform tasks on our behalf and need to share your information with them." You know what? I don't want Edmodo having my kids' information, and I don't want them sharing it with anybody. I don't trust any of these people. I spend too much time on this, and remember, they're paid with the data. They don't get any money for it, but they can pay others to analyze it. And I think I know who it's going to be. You'll see in a minute if I'm right. I could be wrong. The left and right agree on this stuff. There's a handout up here, the second one, and there's entities on the left and right that talk about these profiles that these third parties will be creating on our kids if we let them. And basically, they're amassing a profile. The very last sentence, "We do not know what student data will be collected, stored, and shared, how it will be analyzed, who it will be shared with, if it will ever be deleted by any or all of these people. I think I know. And most importantly, we don't know how it's going to affect our children's futures. We have no idea. But it's not stopping us from going 100 miles an hour down this road. We don't know where it ends. It could be like a cliff going right at the edge. That's where it's going in my mind." Okay, so specifically, what data will be collected? Now, this is Nevada. This is the Nevada Statewide Longitudinal Data System. Nevada's really good at renaming things. They named it to Empower. Nevada P20 to Workforce, preschool to workforce, research data system. That's the cradle to grave. And within Empower, there's at least 4 segments. The preschool data, the K-12 data, which is mostly what I'm going to look at, and that's going to be the same, we already mentioned briefly. Infinite Campus, that's a third-party vendor that's paid a lot of money by our state to keep track of our kids, because we couldn't do that on our own, I guess. The college data and the workforce data. As far as we know, none of this data ever gets deleted. What is the Empower system for? Now, this came 2 months after FERPA, the final gutting of FERPA, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. But here's what the Department of Education gave Joe Hart to say. I talked to Joe Hart twice about this. This language came from the Department of Education.
Nevada's Department of Education is receiving a $4 million grant. This grant will allow the department to follow individual students' progress from pre-kindergarten through high school all the way to the workforce. The system will help direct students to the type of college or career-ready jobs and into a field which will allow them a successful outcome for both the student and their state.
Not everybody is excited about that. I know a lot of people at the Department of Education. I wouldn't let them walk my dog if I had one. It's not their job to direct our kids anywhere. They should focus on improving education in our state, but that's not what they're focused on. Again, that language came directly from them, according to Joe. And then in 2015, the Review Journal published an article titled "Nevada's New Super Data System Makes School Records Permanent." And they're talking about the Empower system. Everything about every kid starting in preschool. Now, Infinite Campus. Some parents love it because you can check kids' grades, you can check a lot of things in Infinite Campus, but what you don't think about is that data's there. It's not just for you. So all the school districts in the state of Nevada upload data from Infinite Campus to that same system, to the State Department of Education every night. Now, those of you who are parents, they don't upload all the data in Infinite Campus. They only upload a subset of the data every night to SANE. In all the districts, 16, 17 districts, do the same thing. Now, Infinite Campus, there's a tab in Infinite Campus, and I've seen it. It's called the Multi-Tiered System of Supports, MTSS. That's another one of those places where non-cognitive data on your child is stored. Anybody that's at the school can enter information about your data. Johnny's this, or they got in a fight today. Probably not like their opinions. So the school psychologists, teachers, the principals, the counselors, the school nurse, they can add non-academic data about your child. So again, my suggestion to protect your own kids, and I've already done this on my 3 kids that are still in school, the 3 that aren't perfect. I went in and I asked the principal to see what data is in there. on each of my kids. What's in that tab? The multi-tiered system of supports. And luckily, there was nothing on any of my kids. But I guarantee you there's a lot of information about a lot of kids, and most parents have no idea. Again, it's all done without parents knowing. So let parents know. I mean, we're doing the best we can to get the word out, but it's hard. Okay, so the SANE data directory, the Nevada Department of Education, K-12. Okay, they get data from the tests, the SBAC test, the science test, the 5th and 8th grade, and the end of course exams. So I went through and I saw all the data that they get, and I put it here. There's 22 slides, and this is just the testing data. So we're not going to go through each of these, but it's hundreds of fields of data just on the tests. And what you'll see at the end, I'll wait till I get to the end. So there's 22 slides like this: reading, science, math, listening. It's heaviest on math and reading. So if your kid's not good at math and good at reading, the state knows it's not good for your kid. But then there's some fields like this: student engaged in writing. And there's one of these for each subject. So that must come up. That doesn't come up once in 12 years. That must come up a lot. So each of these little fields probably have a ton of data in them. And these are only, you know, a couple hundred maybe out of the 1,000 or so. This is the SANE database right here. And this is what Nevada is collecting now on our kids. But it's a work in progress. It's going to, probably the next time we do this presentation, it'll be twice this fat. So again, they want to know what's wrong with your kid. They want to know about disabilities. They want psychological. So this is the page on disabilities. It's in here. It's downloaded from the Department of Ed's website. Discipline. If your kid ever got suspended, they want to know a lot about discipline. What's wrong with your kid? I hope they don't do lunch suspensions, because my son Anthony spends a lot of time on lunch detention. But I don't know. I don't know what they're doing with that. It's way too much information, and it's growing. So SANE was supposedly created to share student data between and within states. So if a kid transfers from here to Las Vegas or from here to Oklahoma, because we'll get to that in a second, and to share supposedly aggregated data to the federal government. So it's not supposed to be about your, it's not supposed to identify the kid. It's just supposed to go to the federal government. I don't believe it, and I'll show you why in just a minute. But whatever the rules are today, they can be changed in the future. So once the database is there, and once they have 1,000 fields of data about your kid, who knows where what's going to be. So keep your kids off of some of this data getting in here. Okay, now the federal government, the Common Education Data Standards, they currently have over 3,300. They call them data elements. And if you look at IP address, that's probably for the one-to-one device your child was issued. So that way, once they have that IP address, they know everything your kid does on that computer too. That's one of the 3,300 plus data elements. And again, they want to know what's wrong with your kid. So one of these, diseases, illness, and other health conditions. This is on the federal Common Education Data Standards. So I highlighted the ones in red that I thought were especially interesting. And I noticed that the first two that are, in my mind, problematic about emotional disorders, the first two almost exactly match what's in the SANE database. Emotional behavioral disability, here they call it behavioral and emotional disorders. That's what the federal government calls it. And then the second part of that is what SANE calls it. Because it's all about getting the data to the federal government at some point. It's the federal government that paid to set this up. Brian Sandoval didn't pay for this. Behavioral syndromes, and then the second one, serious emotional disturbances. That's in the Nevada SANE system, and there's a very similar one in the state, the federal Common Education Data Standards. Remember, it sounds good. It sounds like it's all about education, right? So we're still working on this, so we don't mesh up with the rest of them. Disorders of the breast, psychological development, intentional self-harm, mood affective disorder, obesity, abortion. Did a girl have an abortion in high school? That's important information for the federal government to have. Nevada doesn't have it yet, but they're still working on this. Schizophrenia, unspecified mental disorders, put me down for that one. And HIPAA rules don't apply to our State Department of Ed or the United States Department of Ed, because they only apply to healthcare providers. So if this data can be obtained by our State Department of Ed, like we just saw some of it is, or the Federal Department of Ed, HIPAA rules don't apply. I know,
That's crazy.
this is why I don't sleep well.
It's criminal.
So one of the 3,300 plus data elements is activity type.
That's what you're legislating.
But by the way, even though this is only one of the 3,300, there's 200 categories underneath it.
Yep.
So here's another one. This one only has 100 categories underneath it. This is, what did your kid do when they were in high school? Future business leader, future leader of America, model United Nations, religion, faith, speech, debate, Republican, Democrat, other. Again, this is what the federal government wants collected. I didn't find that in the state one yet. But we don't know what's coming. So here's why I don't believe what they say. The U.S. Department of Labor, they've told us that they don't want aggregated data. They've told us in their documents that we want to follow individuals from preschool to the workforce and beyond. That's what the U.S. Department of Labor wants. And I think that the state of Nevada is wrong because it's the federal government that paid to do all this. They're going to get it eventually. It might not be right now. Now, this is almost out of place, but there was no other place to put it. On the testing data, who gets the most testing data? AIR, eugenics, and SBAC themselves, the DRC, all those acronyms that are doing the psychometric, they get the most data. They get the raw data. The kid sits in front of the computer for 10 hours. It's possible to say how long did it take for the kid before they went to the next question? How long did they spend on this question? They get all that raw data that's behind the scenes. The second most data goes to the state of Nevada via that same system. And then the least amount of data is for the local school districts. Remember, those testing entities, they upload the data directly to the state. It doesn't go to the school districts. So the least amount is the schools, the parents, the teachers. It's just the opposite of what it should be. The teachers, the parents, the schools should be getting the most data, and these people should not be getting any. But anyway, that's the way it is. So the Nevada Department of Education. Nevada is the only state in the country who said I had to pay, or said any parent had to pay to see the data they're tracking on their own kids. $10,000 is what they said it would cost me. Fox covered it, CBS covered it. No, $10,000 total. They gave me a break. The U.S. Department of Education got involved, and they told the Nevada Department of Education, you can't charge the guy to see his own kid's data. So they let me come in to see my kid's data. My wife and I spent 4 hours going over our kid's data with the Department of Ed. Here's what we found.
Did they keep it?
No, they wouldn't print it out for me. All of the children that I have, my 4 kids, there were erroneous addresses associated with all of my kids. My older kids had over 30 erroneous addresses associated with them. At least some of the erroneous addresses were of other children in Washoe County School District. And then there was a whole bunch of coded information that they said were test scores. So I said, well, how do we know they're test scores for my kids and not for these other kids that are associated with my kids? They said, Dad, don't worry, we're pretty sure they are. So then it came out. So the Nevada Journal talked to the Nevada Department of Ed and said, what's up with all this erroneous data? And what the Department of Ed said is, quote, the NDE is not aware of any bug or system issue that would cause data inaccuracies, and that when it becomes aware of any of its records are inaccurate, it takes steps to correct that information.
Did they correct it?
So that's great. I never went back because it doesn't matter, because if they correct it today, what's it going to be next week? So probably the first 4 kids in the state that were checked, there's a lot of bad information on. What about the other 400,000 students? I don't think it matters because I think they're still collecting and doing as much as they can. It's very frustrating. Okay, how can all this happen without parent consent? And I'm going to go through this kind of quickly too, because FERPA got gutted twice. It took the Democrats plus the Republicans to screw this up. This first got gutted under Bush 2, and that allowed these schools and states to share personally identifiable information without parental notice. And then, right after that was back in 2008, And then at the time, Arnie Duncan was the Secretary of Education. Here's what Arnie Duncan said in 2009, after the first gutting of FERPA.
Hopefully someday we can track children from preschool to high school, from high school to college, and college to career.
That's what all this is about. Then during the second gutting of FERPA, the ACLU sent a letter to the Department of Ed. I'm just going to say what's in red. The changes, quote, the changes pose serious privacy concerns. There must be no creation of a national student database. ACLU 2011. And that's exactly what's happening now. Except it's happening in each state individually because it's illegal for the federal government to do it. They're just making it so that they can get the data somehow. But so 2011. And then later in 2011, President Obama came in and finished it off. And what he said is you can disclose personal identifiable information to any outside organization for research. So that was the end of it. Then the federal government spent over $612 million to ensure that 47 states all have the exact same statewide longitudinal data systems. Nevada took $10 million of that money, and that's that Empower system that we were talking about. Cradle to grave. 47 states, same database. In 2015, the National Review Online, they were a little late to the party, but they agreed with the ACLU's letter from 2011. Quote, there is still a very real possibility that Common Core will usher in cradle to grave dossiers on every American. That's exactly what's happening now. How often do the ACLU and the National Review agree? Okay, then it gets better. February 2016, the ACLU and the 10th Amendment Center joined forces on data privacy, and they wrote model legislation that 16 states were working on to help protect children. Nevada's not one of the states that's trying to get this through. I don't know where all this legislation is, but 16 states were trying to protect student data. Our state isn't. How often do the ACLU and the 10th Amendment Center agree on anything? And that's why I'm saying the group that's in here now, the people that I know, we're from progressive to conservative, but we agree on this one thing, and we can't talk about anything else.
Sure we do.
Especially you, Gallimore. Okay, so just 10 months after the final gutting of FERPA, the United States Department of Education, and you can't make this stuff up, they held their first ever Data Palooza. That's what they called it. There's the page. Now this guy from Newton, this is who I think might be getting some of Edmodo's data, but I don't know for sure.
Education happens to be, today, the world's most data mineable industry by far, and it's not even low.
There you go. There you go.
Okay, that's what he said. So how much data does Newton know about each student?
Because we have 5 orders of magnitude more data about you than Google has. We literally have more data about our students than any company has about anybody else, about anything, and it's not even close.
Okay.
They have more information than Google.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
That keystroke. Does it take your kid 3 seconds to get to the next thing, or 6 seconds to get to the next thing? Okay, so these companies are, if you go to Newton's website and you go to one of their pages, they list the companies that I guess are affiliated with them. And Edmodo is the very first one they list. And I don't know this for sure, but I suspect, getting this presentation together, I think I learned something. I think Newton might be one of those companies that Edmodo needs to share our children's data with. I'm not sure, could be wrong, just speculation, but they're like the 2 biggest ones, Edmodo and Newton. And Newton mentions them on their website, but they don't get into details, which why would they, right? Who owns your children's personally identifiable information? Last session, those of us in this room from Protecting Nevada Children worked on this SB 463, and initially it said that the parent or the child owned their personally identifiable information. At the 11th hour, it got gutted out. So the only thing I can tell you is in Nevada, we do not own our children's personal information. The school district treats it like it's theirs. The State Department of Education treats it like it's theirs. Nobody treats it like it's ours. Okay, so now data breaches. all these entities getting all this data, how likely is it that they'll all be able to keep it secure forever?
Zero.
Almost every week we hear of large data breaches.
Possible. Yep.
So, Education Week 2015, quote, privacy concerns associated with integrated data systems, including potential breaches, the creation of inaccurate or misleading profiles, the possibility of stigmatization of children are immense. So again, it doesn't matter if the data is accurate, we just got to collect it all. Like on my kids, I never even went back to see if they corrected it. I will someday, but what's the point? Because then you got to go back again. 2016, Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal, Washington's next hacking target, the U.S. Department of Education. And then they said in 2015, the Internal Audit of Information Security revealed an inability to detect unauthorized devices connecting into the network. That's the U.S. Department of Education's website. Thank you, Jim. U.S. Department of Education, earlier this year there was a major data breach at the U.S. Department of Education, at their website. Now, Edmodo, this company, this is the one that we talked about a few times. This is one of the biggest. Edmodo, you know, they say that they're an education vendor. I think of them more as a student data mining vendor. They get our data, our kids' data for free, then they pay others to analyze it. Earlier this month, Edmodo had a data breach. 77 of its 78 million users' data was breached. ZDNet called it one of the biggest data breaches so far in 2017. So, the Department of Education is getting our kids one-to-one devices. The districts and the local school administrators are pressuring kids to create accounts and do all this work and share all this data on these entities like Edmodo. And then when there's a data breach, nobody says anything. Nobody tells the parents that there was a data breach. I'm still waiting for, I even asked Washoe County School District, are you going to tell my kid? Are you going to tell the parents about the data breach? Evidently, there's no law in Nevada that requires them. School board members know there was a breach. They know there's a bunch of kids. One of the problems is they don't know which kids are even in Edmodo because they had all these kids sign up without getting parent authorization first. That was a question we asked before that they said we don't have the records. They don't know. Even though Edmodo, in their terms of service, it tells you the first thing, if you're under 18, you got to get your parents' permission. School district's just not doing that.
And remember, they don't declare any liability.
That's different. That's the NGA and CCSSO. They're the ones who limited their liability. No, but the school district is just worried about CYA. They're not worried about protecting the kids, in my opinion. But at least we have a school board member here tonight, so that's really good. No one knows all the implications of having all our children's data out there. Once it's out there, you can't take it back. All you can do is what you can do to protect your own kids if your kids are in the public school. It's up to you to protect your children, their data, and their future. Because at the moment, our legislators, the Nevada Department of Ed, and the local districts are not. There's a lot of people writing about student data. 2014 was a really good year. People on the left and right wrote about the data, the profiles, all kinds of stuff. The best one is the Washington Post article from 2015 titled "The Astonishing Amount of Data Being Collected About Your Children." There's only one state Department of Education mentioned in that article, Nevada, and it's about the $10,000 that they wanted to charge me. Okay, what can you do to protect your kids? And there's a handout with this full page. So this is the last handout at the edge of the table. Don't let your kids take the SBAC or the 5th and 8th grade science exam. It's simple.
But then they fail.
We'll talk about that in just a minute. I'm almost done. I know you're glad, probably. Don't let your child use a one-to-one device at school. And that's hard to do, but I think the district's going to accommodate parents who don't want to use those devices because they should. And they won't educate parents about it, but at least they'll let you opt out. Again, I'm doing it. It's not easy sometimes. My daughter's mad at me. Don't email my teachers. Don't email anybody. My high school daughter. Don't allow your children to create third-party vendor accounts or log into any website that's related to education. And it's not just at school. One of the assembly people in Carson City said her daughter in Washoe County has to log in, her 3rd grader has to log into 5 websites to do her homework. And I said, aren't you worried about all those vendors having all that information on your data? Oh no, she logs in using anonymously. And then I went home and I thought about that and I said, and she used to work for the Department of Ed. And I thought about that and I said, well, that's great, that you know enough to have your child log in anonymously. Don't the other parents in the state deserve to know what you know? I guess she's not worried about the other kids in the state. She's worried about her daughter. It's very frustrating. She never replied to the email. But there were 3 of us in the room when she said it. I think 3 of us are here right now when she said that. Learn how social and emotional will be assessed at your school. I can't tell you, you gotta learn, you gotta ask the district, ask the teachers, ask the principal. Do not allow your kids to take those psychological assessments, the DESA or the SEL Web, or any other site. And there's at least one other assessment being used in the district at Lincoln Park, and it's neither one of these. I was hoping she'd be here tonight, but I don't think she's here. She's probably found out by now. Do not let your child complete surveys at school, especially on a computer. Learn what's in your child's Infinite Campus account, especially that multi-tiered system of supports tab. Educate others on the contents of this presentation. Parents, community leaders, educators, clergy, legislators, the media. Educate the political candidates and ask what they're going to do to protect children's data. This session, probably nothing, unless our information that we have right now out it's with Mo Dennis, SB 467, and it's basically only about third-party vendors, and we're trying to get third-party vendors to tell parents what data they're collecting, what it's used for, and make it so parents have to opt into those vendors. We don't know if that's going to go anywhere. SB 467 has been stalled. So, and the other thing you can do is get on the mailing list. If you didn't get my email about this meeting this morning, and you want to know what's going on, please make sure I get your email address. Maybe if somebody could take this around. You want to do that? Make sure that pen works. Please print your email address so I can read it. Help plan more meetings like this, because we'll do it. And we have a box. This is all voluntary. Do you have a question or out of film?
No. I'd like you to tell people who may see this later how they can get in touch and get more info. Okay.
So this is all voluntary. We need some money. So if you could please put something in here and just pass that around. Actually, does somebody want to take it around? Margaret, she's tough. Don't leave unless they put something. No, just kidding. Don't let them leave unless they put something. Really,
I'm standing
this costs me money. I'm a real estate broker. I do this. I spend way too much time on this. But I know this is very important to our kids. This is huge, and nobody really has a vested interest in telling parents what's going on. So I made it my mission. I didn't want to make it my mission. It happened. I wish I never heard of student data mining, but unfortunately, here we are. Okay, almost done. You can find us here at Facebook. If you're on Facebook, we're at Protect Nevada Children. That's the most active place that we're posting stuff daily. You can also find us on the web, and actually, this is what we need part of the money for, is to keep this website going. NevadansAgainstCommonCore.com. We need your help getting the word out, and thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it. And now, questions.